Frontier City Expats Club is a non-profit social organisation, and our speakers are volunteers. The club as such assumes no responsibility or liability for the professional reputation of or the quality of services provided by the speaker today.
So who have we got for you today? Well, it's the return of one of our own very famous members, Ren Lexander. He's entertained us before, dancing, speaking, singing, on video. This time he's going to tell us about his book, or two of his books actually, but mainly the book about seduction by the stars. Now everybody's scratching their heads saying, seduction by the stars. Well, it's an astrological guide to love, lust, and intimate relationships. Co-written with a professional astrologer, Geraldine Rose. The book has been published in the USA, England, Spain, and of course, Australia, as Ren is Australian. So I'm happy to introduce Ren to tell us all about his adventures in the minefields of love. Ren!
That's not true. It's not going to be all about my adventures. We'd be here for 12 hours. So, this is the book. As you might know, I'm actually filling in for a true star, Tim Elliott, the very brilliant Elton John impersonator, does a show, and he's brilliant. And he couldn't make it through gig commitments that came up and ill health. So I'm a substitute star talking about Seduction by the Stars, an astrological guide to love, lust, and intimate relationships. Oh, of all the books I've written, this is my all-time favourite review. I found this when I was just doing some research for this book. So here's the reviews. 1 star, this is on Amazon. Would have given no stars if possible. Do you want to feel like an attractive, worthwhile human being? Do not read this book. And I think it's a guy because he's had the strength to rip the book up. Right? But notice what he doesn't say. He doesn't say, it's inaccurate, right? That would be what you'd say if you really hated a non-fiction book. He says, he's basically saying like, no, it's true, but I didn't like it, so I ripped it up. Love that review. Oh, let me tell you a story. This is from a few years ago. A friend of a friend used to come down to Pattaya, and he was telling me he met this woman in a bar in Bangkok. Not a bar girl, Haiso. And she was an Aries. And classic Aries, and this is even mentioned in the book. She owned a sports car, right? I only would have made it more perfect if it was a red sports car. So, and Aries, you know that expression, you only get one chance to make a first impression? That's the quintessential Aries catchphrase. They want to make a big impression the first time they meet them. They're into the first impression. So much so, she gave some financial support to one of her friends, and she wouldn't let the friend wear makeup around her. She was the only one allowed to wear makeup. Anyway, he's having this thing with her. He's obviously really attracted to her, but he can't get her over the first hump, by which I mean the first hump, right? And so he's saying to me, look, she even came over and she even stayed, but she had this towel wrapped around her and she's in my bed and I just couldn't do anything. So I said, oh, okay, Aries, okay. I said, say these exact words to her, exactly these words. It's okay, I understand. You're frightened of sex, I understand, it's okay. We'll just be friends and have a meal together once a week. Say those exact words to her. So later on I'm going to tell you how that went. So how did I get to this? How did I get here to this point? Now what I'm going to play you is an interview that I did on national Australian television when Seduction by the Stars came out. Every Australian here knows the midday show, right? The famous midday show, national, hugely popular. And this is when David Rain was doing the show. And it's an interview. I'm going to break a couple of my codes. This is actually more than 4 minutes, this interview. It's 7 minutes. but it gives you a very good idea of the book, its tone, and how people respond to it.
Author and sensitive New Age guy, Ren Lexander, believes we can turn our love lives around by simply knowing a person's sun sign. Not star sign, sun sign. Would you please welcome an apparently highly sexed Capricorn, Ren Lexander. We're talking about sun signs.
Yeah, the sign of the zodiac that your sun's in, because there's also moon signs and your ascendant and every
and star signs.
sign.
It's all different.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, I'm a complete and utter skeptic, but I had great fun reading this book.
Yes. If you don't believe in astrology, it's still wonderful because it's just, everybody's interested in relationships. Everybody's interested, well, almost everybody's interested in sex. So you can have a lot of fun with this book, even if you don't believe in star signs.
Now, you're a Capricorn, and you're supposed to be serious, practical, reliable, and a goat. How come you wrote a book like this?
Well, this is a secret astrological knowledge, but actually Capricorn is the most highly sexed sign in terms of raw sexual drive, and they tend to get more sexual as they get older. So it's a bit of an arcane. But actually how it happened was interesting. I went for an astrological reading with the co-author, Geraldine, and I came in, and she'd only drawn up my chart, and she said, "Are you a writer?" And I said, "Oh, yes, I am." She said, "Good, because I think otherwise you'd be a drug addict." So it's so strongly in my chart to write. And then we got talking, and then the book emerged as a co-written thing.
Now, in the book it says that Capricorns are like the sexual athlete. Any Capricorns in the audience?
Any sexual athlete?
You sexual athletes, you?
You animals.
Does that sound right to you? You want to think about that for a moment, or what?
They don't like public exposure, so they're probably all going, well, I'm not going to confess to it.
All right, so if I was to seduce a Capricorn, what's the best way to do it?
Honesty and openness, but the key thing is that Capricorns always have a view to the long term, and they won't embrace short-term wildness if it's going to have a very bad effect on their career or the long-term life. So they want to make sure that happens, they want to know that you're like 100% emotionally stable, that there's no quirky things in your psyche, and that you're not going to blab to everybody about it. They don't want dramas in their relationships. They want their relationship to be a source of refuge for them.
Right. Now, throughout the book, I mean, you've got ways to seduce people, key tactics, no-nos and things like that. What's the no-no with the Capricorn?
Well, definitely public ridicule or criticising them in public. Very, very big no-nos. They'll go off you unbelievably like that. One of the big no-nos is never make a sexual... They're into contracts. They're into meeting their side of the contract. So if you say to a Capricorn, meet me here at such and such a time and we'll have a wild fling, and then you get a hangover the night before and you can't do it, they'll go off you forever. They'll never want to know you again.
All right, any Virgos in the audience? Uh-oh. Uh-oh.
Oh, stacks of Virgos.
Uh-oh. Because you don't have too many nice things to say about the Virgos.
I only have nice things to say about Virgos. This is not true.
Well, no, that's not true. I mean, Virgos, the sign is of a virgin woman, but you say that they lack sexual spark.
The trouble...
No? You don't think so?
No. The interesting thing about Virgos is this, they seem to have a built-in desire to be good and pure and honest, which is wonderful. But if, as children, they receive messages from their parents that, like, you shouldn't be sexual because being sexual is not good, then they tend to take that on board, and it can become a bit of an effort with them then to become more sexual. But if they get over that, and especially in later life, they can become more and more sexual as they get on. And I've had 2 fantastic relationships with Virgo women, and I think Virgo people are wonderful people. My current girlfriend's a Virgo, and she's fantastic.
And did you use... Settle down. Did you use any of these techniques in here on your current girlfriend?
Absolutely, absolutely. I ended up... She has some fire in her chat, and I tried to do fiery seduction. It didn't work. I had to go back to the tried and proved Virgo seduction, which is saying... look, being very honest and saying, look, I'm really sexually attracted to you, and being honest and upfront, and then letting that sink into her psyche and come to terms with it, and then we proceeded from there at a later date.
Because I was reading through this on the weekend. There was a bunch of us around at our place, and one of the girls with us was a Virgo, and she was quite sort of disappointed at first, but then there's a lot of good things about them as well.
Fantastic people, yeah, Virgos.
What other star signs do we have in the audience? Gemini. Funny you should mention Gemini. Tracy's a Gemini.
Oh,
And I actually wrote down something that you say about Geminis. They have a veritable laboratory of sexual experiments. Would that be true, Tracy?
Yeah, that'd be right.
Geminis are fascinating because they're one of the most quickly aroused signs. They get quickly stimulated by almost anything, and they like to they like to know that their partner's very mentally quick, and so they tend to be turned on. I think I can say this. There's a line in the book which is very accurate, which is mental stimulation equals instant lubrication.
Oh no. So how would you seduce a Gemini?
Quickly. Quickly. Don't muck around. This is it. If they're attracted to you, you've got to go bang. Don't think, oh, I must make it to the bedroom. If they're in the lounge room, go for it. Because by the time you get to the bedroom, they might have changed their minds. You know? Because they change their minds so often.
Does that sound right to all you Geminians?
No, yes. No, not yes.
Because you also say about Geminis that they're not interested in the long, drawn-out scenario.
Yeah, I've talked to a few Geminis who'll say, he said, I get bored. You know, 1 minute I'm clawing my boyfriend's back with passion, the next minute I'm staring up the ceiling thinking, when's he going to be over? When's he going to I want to do something else.
All right, now let's talk about Taurians. I'm a Taurian. And I'll quote what you say about Taurians. Apparently I'm a veritable glutton for sex. Quantity, quality, and more quantity. And partners of Taurians will share bounteously in their love of the sensual pleasures, art, music, food, and sex.
Yep, I have a Taurus ascendant, I can relate to all that.
I'm fabulous, therefore.
The downside of Taurians is they tend to be a little bit conservative. So if you can find one that you can get through that conservative barrier, then they can be really endurance. I'm not sure that they bring necessarily a lot of imagination to the bedroom, but in terms of sheer endurance and appetite and it's sort of tough. They're a tough sign. They can keep going and they can do all sorts of hours and stuff. Yeah. But the key thing is that a way to a Taurus's sexual parts is through their stomach. See, they must be well fed. You can't seduce a hungry Taurian. It would have to be rape.
Oh, so you have to wait until they're sort of bloated.
Yes. So this is interesting. Like,
good look.
Taurians will have sex in a bloated. But Virgos can't. They sort of say, oh no, I'm full. I can't have sex, I'm full.
And the Taurians just go,
I'm full, let's do it. Yeah.
Would you please thank Ren Lexander? The book's called Seduction by the Stars.
So, I hope you enjoyed that. We had fun doing the interview on live TV. How did I get there? All right, the journey to that point in time. Sorry, Aries is going to get a mention. It's the first sign of the zodiac, so it's an initiatory sign, so I'm initiating this conversation. So how I got there, first got an inkling of interest in astrology, because, by the way, it rules initiations and beginnings. So it actually rules the loss of your virginity. And classically, I lost my virginity to an Aries woman. Right? This is classic, right? And about 8 out of 10 of the first talks, the first women I was with were Aries. And I started to notice there was a sort of similar, who's Aries here? Hello? Anyway, come on, I'm not going to bag you out too much. Anyway, and there was a certain pattern in their behaviour, and I noticed I'll share this now. I had this one Aries woman I was really interested in, but we didn't. It sort of was all just friendly. And just one day, I was sitting on my condo at night. I just picked up her hand and stuck 2 of her fingers in my mouth, unannounced, and then suddenly it was all on. And there was another Aries woman I was dating, and she said, I can't explain it, but I actually like the way you treat me, because I was treating her differently to how I would other women. I was being very sort of standoffish and aloof and stuff. So that was my first interest in, like, why did all these Aries women come into my life and why do they seem to have certain similarities? And then I was going to write a send-up of psychological stuff, and I thought I'd include astrology, so I got hold of this classic book, Linda Goodman's Sun Signs, which was the first real book on astrological signs. And it's written in a very sort of gentle style, and you read that book and think, wow, everybody's so wonderful, where do all the arseholes come from? And she's a double Aries, this woman who wrote it, so Aries get to sound very good in this book. So then I was, some years later, some of you were here when I gave a talk on the secret meaning of names and the psychological impact of names. I was at the Mind Body Spirit Festival, and there was a guy doing astrological readings. So I thought, oh, I'll pay for an astrological reading. And I had a different girlfriend there, Aries, and she was, and he's saying to me, looked at my chart and he said, "You are a sexual predator." And I went, and my girlfriend's going, "Don't encourage him, he's bad enough now." And anyway, but what he said that really struck me, he looked at my chart and said, "Kidneys most at risk." And I almost fell off the chair because I had a stone in the kidney when I was 18. Nobody gets stones in the kidneys when they're 18, right? I had another incident when I was 25. Most of my health things have been around not getting another stone in the kidney. And then I was going through a difficult phase in my life. This is me when I was young. I'm the youngest one there. It's my mother, my brother. My brother was epileptic with cerebral palsy, and my mother at that stage had her Alzheimer's deteriorated, and we were putting her in a nursing home. So I was going through her stuff, and I found a name card, right? A birth card, sorry. And it had my weight at birth, my name, and the exact time I was born, right? Now, this was really interesting to me because that meant I could actually get an astrological reading. Now, when I was reading this book, I read the different things, and I came to Aquarius, and I thought, well, I know I'm a Capricorn, but I can really relate to some of the things under Aquarius, right? Really relate to it. And maybe I should have been an Aquarian because I was cesarean sectioned into being a Capricorn. My mother never even went into labour because the labour trauma is what turned my brother into epileptic and spastic. So when I came along, they just did it automatically. So I had some New Age friends. And I said, "Do you know an astrologer?" Turned out they highly recommended an astrologer that was in the neighbouring suburb, Geraldine Rose. And she drew up my chart, and as indicated in that thing, I walked in, she'd done up my chart, didn't know me from Adam, pre the World Wide Web, and she said, "You're a writer, aren't you?" And I said, "Well, yes, I am." And she said, "I'm glad you're a writer, otherwise you'd be a drug addict." So she looked at my chart, and this is what I discovered why I had this thing about Aquarius, because the three major things in your chart that affect who you are your sun sign, there I am in Capricorn, and your moon sign, Aquarius, right? And the ascendant, which is Taurus. Now, the moon sign tends to represent your mother and how you were as a child. So they say that the journey of life is you start off in your moon sign, go into your sun sign, and then become a bit more like your ascendant. The other thing that she said, which really freaked me out, and this to me is still the eeriest part of astrology that I really have trouble wrapping my head around, is that she looked at my chart and saw the moon square, Saturn represents the father, moon represents the mother. She looked at that and said, "Your mother and father didn't get on at all." And this is true, right? Still freaks me out that she could pick that up just from my chart. Really bizarre. And then she made all sorts of other, perceptive comments. Now, one myth I want you to take away and put in the dustbin. So this is what astrology is really about. It's about individualization. It's not about putting you in one of 12 boxes. It can happen, because you know what day you were born on, you know your sun sign. But even that, you need to be sure. I once met this woman, she was a Sagittarian, she told me she was Sagittarian. So when it came to the first kiss, I gave her this hyper, passionate, overpowering kiss that I'll only ever give a Sagittarian. turned out she was an early Capricorn. She didn't know what sun sign she was. I would have never done that kiss if I'd known she was a Capricorn. So, but it's one of the things that individualises you. The idea is that when you emerge from the artificial womb, the protected universe of your mother's womb, and you get the universe imprints its energies upon you. And you can't change that. You can become a high expression of that chart or a low expression of that chart. So it doesn't put you in one of 12 boxes. It's incredibly individualising. What is synastry? Well, synastry is the most convincing area of astrology. It's where they compare two people's charts and they can see an unbelievable amount of things about how people's relationship is. So at the time, I had a Virgo girlfriend. I moved on from Aries, vowed to never have another Aries girlfriend. By the way, the sign most sworn off by other signs. I'm never going out with another Aries. One of the reasons for that is because they're all beginnings. They're incredibly exciting and vivacious and sexually hungry at the beginning, but then it's like it just plummets. The woman whose fingers I stuck in my mouth, she kept saying I've got a low sex drive, and we were like rabbits, right? And then, but after 6 weeks, it kicked in. She sort of, lost interest. The Aries are the most sign likely to say you can't expect to be as good as it was in the beginning. And Capricorn, like me, rules the long term. I think, no, it should get better. Anyway, so this is synastry. So I had this wonderful Virgo girlfriend, but we had some issues in the relationship. So I had her, Geraldine, do Megan's chart. Now, at the time, so she looked at Megan's chart. I thought the whole thing would be about the relationship. The relationship was this tiny part at the end. But she did Megan's chart and she said, yes, Megan. She has Moon in Scorpio. Most difficult Sun or Moon placement, Moon in Scorpio. She's got Moon in Scorpio, Pluto is on her Moon, and currently she's obsessed with the relationship with her mother. And her mother probably says to her things like, oh, I've done so much for you and you owe me so much. This was word for word what her mother was saying to her. Word for word, right? And this woman who's normally a hyper-conscientious Virgo, she was like going to work, literally, staring at the wall and obsessing about her mother. And one stage she said to her mother, you blame me for your life. And her mother replied, well, if I don't blame you, who else have I got to blame? That's why I'm going to use that line sometime in my life. So, and then it came right at the end, she finally got synastry. And she said, oh yeah, okay, synastry, your two charts. Well, you've got great stars for communication, great stars for respect, and you'll never get it together in the bedroom. You have wild Moon in Aquarius at 90 degrees to a tied up, conflicted Moon in Scorpio, and you'll never get it together in the bedroom. And that was our whole relationship in 3 or 4 sentences. That was exactly correct. So I accepted that she was that way and I was a different way, and we had to do the separation process. Now at the time, the astrologer, Geraldine, was doing a monthly column, horoscope column, for Australian Slimming or Australian Weight Watchers. Right, and she said to me, Ren, we had these new magazines appearing in Australia, Australian Penthouse and Australian Playboy, only a couple of years old. She said, Ren, I want to write a monthly horoscope column for, one of the new men's magazines. Now, as it happened, I was writing quite a few comedy articles at the time that those magazines were actually publishing. And so I write a thing like how to this was actually in a newspaper. It was called How to Translate Teachers' Report Cards. Right? I researched this with teachers. It's like, so the teacher writes a good term. Anybody who was a teacher in Australia or a teacher anywhere? Anyway, the teacher, hey, yeah. So the teacher would write, so I researched this, like the teacher writes about the child, a good term's work. And that translates as, I don't remember this child. And then it says, a fair term's work, which means I talked about this child in the staff room and none of the teachers remember this child. Right? So, and then we did, but my favourite one, and by the way, I swept all these translating articles into a book that was published as The Complete Guide to Translating Australian Bullshit, right? What people say and what they mean. My favourite one, which Australian Penthouse published, was how to translate doctor's bullshit, right? So it's like, and I had a Sagittarian girlfriend at the time who was a nurse. So I'd say to her, what do you say if the patient's got 3 months left to live? And she'd say, you can't tell with these things, they come and go. And then I say, well, what if the patient's only got a week left to live? You say, we'll just top you up with some blood and send you home, right? This is actually true. So if I ever say to you, we'll just top you up with hospital and top you up with blood and send you home, it's right because they're trying to clear out the bed because they know you're going to die within a week. This actually happened to me in Thailand at the other club. There was an appeal for blood, for A-negative blood. And A-negative blood, right? And then it's an urgent appeal, and I went to Chonburi Hospital and they tested my blood and say negative, blah, blah, blah. And she said, and the Thai wife was trying to get blood for this much older guy, saying, no, we need 3 lots of blood. And I said, no, not 3 lots of blood. That's classically what they give you, 3 lots of blood, send you home, and let you die at home. Sure enough, I went up. She said, would you like to see my husband? I went up there, and sure enough, he was so going to die within a week, and he did. Anyway, so I was doing this Australian Penthouse, so I knew the editor of this quite well. Can I tell you another story about Doctor's Bullshit? Just quick. I was actually, this is my second favourite thing after that review where the guy tore up the book. I was in a bus on St George Street in Sydney, very busy street, and traffic was really slow. But there was this little van down below us with a couple of guys, and they kept missing the lights and being bipped and stuff, and dragging the chain. And I'm thinking, what are they doing? So I looked down and they had the most recent edition of Australian Penthouse. And I thought, they're looking at the pictures. But then when I looked down further, I realised they were reading my book, my thing on how to translate Doctor's Bullshit. And they were laughing, and that was causing them to miss the lights. That's great feedback for a writer. So Geraldine was like, I want to break into the men's magazine. I knew the editor at Australian Penthouse, he wouldn't go for it. But I didn't want to discourage her. So I said, look, why don't you write an article to get a foot in the door? Seduction by the stars, right? How to seduce by star sign. She said, that's a good idea. But then she kept nagging me and phoning me up. And I realised it was just to get her off my back. It wasn't going to happen, dithering Piscean she was, unless I co-wrote it with her. So we went round so I came round to write the article, and basically within a minute we realised it was a book, not an article, right? And luckily I discovered, I wanted to push it in a more sexual direction than she did, being Capricorn. And I managed to find this book, which is quite a good book. And so that helped. I bought a copy for Geraldine and pushed it in a more sexual direction. The other thing we did is that we hit on this idea, instead of just getting tips about how to seduce the sign, of actually spelling out the actual seduction scenarios to use, right? So there's for every sign, there's 7 different seductions to choose from. And that made it more worthy of its title of Seduction by the Stars. Oh, by the way, this is also a good book. This is like the antidote to Linda Goodman's book, The Dark Side of Science. So when you write a book like this, you're actually writing 12 different books, right? Because there's one for each sign. And people, by the way, it does have an introduction which almost nobody reads. They just turn to their sign or the sign of the woman or guy they're after. So this is it. The lure of an Aries. I used them because of the first sign. How to get them so why do you be attracted to an Aries in the first place? They tend to be very dynamic when you first meet them. How to get them interested in you. Where to take them, what to talk about, what to give them for presents. How to seduce an Aries with actual seduction scenarios. Sex with an Aries, how to keep it interesting, which is a challenge in the long term, not in the short term. How to handle a relationship with an Aries. Aries at their best and worst, and famous sexy Aries and famous unsexy Aries. So it was always meant to be a fun book. And the great thing about this book is that you read about your exes, right? You go, yeah, that's what he was like. Yeah. So I had the girlfriend who was a nurse, the Sagittarian, who helped me with Doctor's Bullshit. She actually, we broke up, but she was always puzzled by, in a sense, how we broke up. Because my mother had the Alzheimer's and my father suddenly had this massive stroke and was paralysed down one side of his body. You couldn't put that in a soap opera, right? Because they said, no, his brother's epileptic and cerebral palsy, his mum's got advanced Alzheimer's. You can't give his father a stroke. It's just like, nobody will believe it. So, and then after that happened, she like went off me. She became like really difficult to deal with and really like pushing me away. And she was puzzled that she was doing this because she's a nurse, considered herself very, very supportive. But, but then when we were doing the Sagittarian section, and Geraldine's talking about it, she says, oh yes, Sagittarians are in the power of positive thinking. They hate to be around negativity. They despise negativity in anybody except themselves. Right? We actually, and so that explained to me why it should be like that when things had gone badly in my life. So at the time, Geraldine had a friend who knew a screen agent in Los Angeles, and and he represented me for a while. I couldn't place a script I'd written, though he really liked it. And he put me in touch with an agent in New York, a literary agent, Howard Moorhan. And Howard Moorhan, I had a number of projects, and I said, this is the easy in, Seduction by the Stars. So I leave it with him, and he phones me up and back in Australia and says, I really didn't like the section on Aries, because he's an Aries, right? And I said, well, you know, their archetypes, blah, blah, blah. And he said, oh no, I didn't say it wasn't accurate. I said I didn't like it. It's accurate, I just don't like it. So this is the Bantam Doubleday Dell edition, terrible cover. So these were picked up by major publishers. You can still get this on Amazon. And this was the Australian edition. By the way, I'll tell a little story here. I tell this story sometimes because when you're a writer, and if somebody makes a suggestion, and you don't immediately go, oh, that's such a wonderful suggestion, they go, oh, you're just being a precious writer, or can't take a suggestion. So when we had this edited in New York, they sent us the galleys to edit, and we looked through it, Geraldine read it, I read it, we phoned up and said, we love your edit. Oh, and they said, well, if there's anything you don't like, fight for it. I said, no, we love every bit of it. Thank you very much. Right? So I tell that story, it's trying to convey that writers are not precious. It's the first time I was ever edited, but I actually thought I was being edited by an adult and not like a precocious, willful high school student. Anyway, so the Australian edition came out. That sold out. Oh, when the Australian edition came out, we went back to Australian Penthouse and said, really this whole book arose from this idea of doing an article for you. Wouldn't you like to do an extract from it in your, in your magazine, and Seduction by the Stars, internationally published? I went, no. But a lot of women's magazines did articles on it. And this is the second edition, which is the Australian one, which I have copies of here. It's 500 baht, which is less than it is on Amazon, and if you're a member, it's 400 baht. Oh, it came out in Spain, Horoscopo Sexual, la Guía Astrológica de la Seduzione, and in England. Now I wanted to use this chart to, this is somewhat more recent than these. One way to use astrology is like, come up to my room and see my etchings, right? I'd like to use, come up to my room and I'll do your astrology chart for you. Right? So this is a woman's astrology chart. And when I met her, we just really hit it off. We just had natural, chemistry and stuff. When I found out she was a Virgo, I predicted that she would be born at a date and time that made an exact ideal angle to my sun. Our suns would make an ideal angle of 120 degrees. Sure enough, born on the 17th, 120 degrees exactly to my sun. And so she came for an astrological reading. So she's got a whole stack of stuff in Virgo here. Now, possibly the thing that caught my eye is this moon, which I hate to say is in Aries. And the thing about it is, you notice all these different angles, this is like 90, the moon is unaspected. It's very significant when something doesn't have an aspect to anything else in the chart. Now, I looked at that moon. Now, I want you to think about how unlikely these predictions are. So she's got moon in Aries. So I said to her, when you were young, you were a tomboy. And she said, yes, absolutely. I played football against boys. I played football against boys. Not soccer, just like football, right? They hit people, right? And she actually wanted to be, classic Aries, wanted to be a professional sports person, but didn't quite make the grade. The other thing about it is that I mentioned it represents your mother. Oh, the other thing is I talked about Aries representing the loss of virginity, and I said to her, look, you initiated the loss of your virginity. You were the one that made it happen. She said, oh yeah, totally. But the other thing about it is because it represents the mother, it's unaspected, right? So I said, it's like you didn't really have a relationship with your mother. So, and your mother probably said to you things to the effect of, I can't believe you sprang from my loins, right? And she said, yeah, no, totally correct. Never really had a relationship with mother. She literally said pretty much that. But her father, represented by Saturn, she's got all sorts of good and challenging angles with. And sure enough, that was the case with that father, who she was very, very attracted to, but also and had a deep relationship with. But the other thing, I mentioned how you can tell things about the relationship between the parents. There's no relationship between the moon and Saturn, so I was able to say to you, Mum, your parents really had no real relationship. She said, yeah, that's correct. He left soon after I was born. So it is quite eerie what you can pick up from the chart. The other thing Geraldine said to me, I think it was 2010, she said, next year, the world has an astrological setup, the same as it had in 1848. And there's going to be a wave of populist uprisings across the planet. And that was the year, the next year was the year of the Arab Spring, Occupy Wall Street, riots in England, all sorts of mass demonstrations across Europe. So, very eerie astrology. The other thing I would say to you, I know, a lot of people here are totally skeptical about astrology, but until you've had your own chart done by a professional type astrologer, you've never looked at astrology. So, coming towards the end of the talk, I posted on Facebook about this talk. This is like a friend of mine in Australia who was a self-confessed cyber slut, right? Tinder, anything. And by the way, he credits this book with a few hundred of his conquests. And anyway, he actually kept track of what star signs that last year he hit like 1,000, right? And this is exactly what you'd expect astrologically. Gemini, the sign of the fling, is top. Capricorn, the high sex drive. Aquarium, the freedom freak, is next. Down the bottom, Taurus, the most conservative sign. Virgo, the least likely to do wild things. So that was actually exactly this is what astrologers would predict. By the way, I saw an article, they asked people where the main change in their lives were, how old they were. And any astrologer will tell you straight away, 29, first Saturn return. That's why people in their 20s are so different to people in their 30s. They go through Saturn return. Saturn comes to the position it was when you were born. And sure enough, the survey, 29. So these are actually some of the more positive comments. 70% of the reviews on Amazon are 5-star. And in fact, some of the 3 stars, I can't believe they gave it 3 stars because they go, oh, this book is fun and educational, blah, blah, blah. And then they give it 3 stars. It's like, anyway, Irresistible, a must, recommended A+, Astrological Kama Sutra and Laughter. Right, my final tip about this book, I do have copies for sale. Do not lend this book, right? One was on Amazon and said, this is my 10th copy of this book. I lend it to friends and I never get it back. I was living in Bangkok. I lived there a year and a half before I came to here. And my friend was saying, oh, I really want something that's cheerful, makes me laugh. I said, right, oh yeah, well, okay, I'll lend you a copy of my book. He said, oh great. I said, no, it's alone. You understand? Alone. Yes, I understand. It's alone. Alone. Yes, I understand. 4 days later, you're never getting this book back. He was going into bars, among other things, he was going into bars, and not, just serving staff, not bar girls, and he's saying, what star's that name? And he'd be reading it out and they'd be laughing their heads off and stuff. And the guy that's clocked up 1,000 through stuff, he lent the book and never got it back. It's notorious, this book, for not coming back. Also, because I gave a talk, I've got, for the same price, I've got copies of How to Communicate Effectively and Build Relationships. This only gets positive reviews. This is where people have said, this book changed my life, worth 1,000 times the cover price, my Bible, buying copies from my friends, dog ear from referring to it. So I have copies, I've only got a few copies of that. So I've got copies of both of these books. If you're interested, come and see me, I'll give you a signed copy. Especially if you're a member, it's $100 off. So Q&A. Ron.
Good job, Ren. I'm proud of you.
I don't know which part of it you're proud of me.
Yeah, now we know about your girlfriends and everything. All right. Hey, the reason I want to ask you is that I had a chart done many, many years ago, and I don't remember now, but how does the chart compare to like somebody that does the tarot cards and stuff like that? Is like same, or how do you feel?
Yeah, I don't know a lot about tarot cards, but I once went to a woman, psychic, and she was definitely psychic. But she said a lot of things that were true, but a lot of it wasn't useful, right? Because the astrology things are often very useful. So it's very useful for me to get the synastry done on that girlfriend. Very often it'll tell you what the transits are, what's happening in your life, and sometimes it's just good to know that the shit's going to come to an end, right? Like, there's going to come a time I'm not obsessing about my mother, right? So that's very useful to know about the transits and that life moves on. I never know whether it's a good sign or a bad sign when I get fewer questions.
You said one at a time, right? Yeah, she teach me well. Okay. What I was going to say is, who does, maybe you covered, I didn't understand, who does charts here in Pattaya or Thailand? You know?
Well, I have done charts here, but as far as I know, I'm probably one of the most knowledgeable people about astrology in Thailand. But you can get them done online, and there's some good ones. So we'll do it online for you.
Really?
But you don't want to sometimes they'll do printouts of your stuff. See, there's a bit of an art to reading charts. Eventually, I guess they'll train AI to do it. But you have to have a sort of picture of the overall charts. And sometimes you'll get things, you'll buy something and it'll say, oh, Mercury, sextiles, Jupiter, and there's so much stuff, it's too swamped. So you really need somebody with skills to do the overall interpretation of the chart.
Okay.
Brian, good to see you, Brian.
Hello, Ren. Thank you forever for what you do. In terms of the believers and the non-believers, men and women, how do they stack up? Who believes in it more than the other?
I think women tend to be more open to it, and they certainly have bought more copies of the book, but then women generally tend to buy more copies of books and stuff. But certainly, when you read it, and especially you read about your exes, and you think, wow, this is really what this person was like, right? So I've got guys who are like, oh, this book is so useful and stuff, it's been so helpful to me. Because one of the most powerful things you can do is change the question, right? People go, I'm nervous about talking to women, but you give them tactics for talking to a Gemini woman, right? And so it equips them with a different set of questions and a different sort of skill set and stuff. So I remember one woman who, she said, oh, this really helped me in my, it's on Amazon review. She said, it really helped me with my relationships. Helped me, this woman, to seduce some Pisces men, but be careful what you wish for. And I remember this other woman said, when I came to read Aquarius, it was like the thing had been just written about me and me alone. Because Aquarians are like, it's a strange contradiction. They're a fixed sign, but they're fixated on freedom. Right? So it's very hard for them to give up their freedom. Often they'll have like secret bank accounts, which is like their escape bank accounts, in case everything goes to crap and they can just flee. Right? Now, I have been an Aquarius, so I tend to be a bit of a bridge burner too much myself. Anything else? No. It's hard to recognise you without Ben next to you.
Yeah, thank you. No, I'm alone. Thank you, Ren, for a very interesting speech. As being a scientist, I just have a follow-up question. As you know, we are living in very different places in the earth, on the earth. And for instance, where I come from, the far north, you have to be born in springtime before in order to have a better life in the future, because then you were born into the warm season. Can you see that in your charts whatsoever?
Not exactly, but you've got to understand that if you're born at the same time but at different parts of the earth, you will have a different chart. Right? And twins can be born like 40 minutes apart. And the world could have turned. They could have different moon signs, different ascendant. So things change. Right? It's very specific to time and place.
Yeah.
Brian.
Would you say that you're promoting this to make somebody wary of not being with someone, or to look for someone to be attracted to? And what if you've just reached the point where you've decided you want to get married, and you have got married, and then you look at this and think, oh my God.
Well, the best thing I can possibly say is that synastry thing. If you're really thinking about getting married, you want to get the synastry done, their chart and your chart, and see how it interacts and stuff. But, you know, we talk about long-term relationships, like how to keep sex good and how to keep the relationship going, no-nos and big no-nos and must-dos and stuff like that. So it's actually, yeah, a lot of people find it very helpful. Brad.
Yeah, you started talking about this woman in the sports car at the beginning, and you never finished the story.
Yeah, I thought I'd finished up that after the Q&A. Thank you for remembering. Are we done on the Q&A? One more?
Yeah, I'm an Aquarius, and have you explained premonitions in my star, which I do have a lot of?
Yeah, well, I'd have to have a look at your chart to see what else is in it and stuff. But Aquarians are more, you know, they like rule the New Age. So they rule like all those sorts of things, New Age awareness and a lot of meditation, and we're in the age of Aquarius now. So yeah, they tend to be more open to those sorts of things. But you could also have some Scorpio and stuff in your chart as well, so you have to look at the exact chart. All done, all changed? One more, excellent.
One more. Sorry for my bad English. I wanted to ask you, if you have a customer, client in front of you, and also you, just imagine you have a client who is in distance, and you talk through email, through different means. What is more effective, and how much this presence of the customer in front of you affects your session? Is that?
Yeah, no, it can be very useful to have a handle on them astrologically, yeah, definitely. And some people are more, so for instance, Geminis want to talk, right? They're great talkers. And yes, they love this stuff, using their hands, and so they're like arch communicators. They all like want to over communicate. And whereas, you can use this definitely in business and so forth. It can be quite handy. So for instance, you want to, Capricorns are more likely to say, well, what are your qualifications? To show me your qualifications up front, blah, blah, blah. Cancerians are more like, nurture me, take me out to lunch, bring me warm food. Actually, it's been shown that if you go to a job interview or meet someone for the first time and you bring in a cup of coffee, a warm coffee, they'll have a much better impression of you as they hold the coffee, right? So don't bring them a cold drink, whatever you do. So there's a Cancerian, so that sort of warm soup thing and stuff. And we actually bring that up, like how to handle people when you have to break difficult news to them. Like you must make sure the Taurians are fed. My brother, for the big trickiest thing about Taurians, the Titanic Taurian temper tantrum. They don't seem to get a little bit angry. It's a flick switch and it's like, oh my God. And so, you know, if you're going to give them bad news, you want to make sure they're really fed. You've got a lot of food inside them. Because you know like how peaceful cows are eating, but then imagine that it's a wild bull charging to you with sharpened horns, which is how they are when they're angry. Help you at all? Read the book, see if you can adapt.
Do I know it? Ren.
Yo.
Do you find this to be an international, have an international application? And in particular, can you apply these things to the Thai people, Thai ladies, for example?
Well, certainly the astrologicals of individuals are still true, across the board and stuff. But for instance, you don't realise astrology is huge in Russia. Really, really big in Russia. Huge. In Japan, they tend to be more into what your blood type is, and you get like, instead of daily horoscopes, you get daily blood types. If you're an O negative today, blah, 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 such as that. But yes, definitely. I met this Taurian Thai, and I would have happily spent the rest of my life with her, and she's going to move in, and then she met a rich guy, and that was him. Had to look after her family first, right? I understand that.
Okay, one more. The deal you're talking about, like online, I did sign up one time, I forget how much it cost was a few years ago, and it was just overwhelming. And I had a really lot of problem getting rid of this lady, you know what I mean? No, she, on and on, I just had to block her, but just want to caution you for that stuff online. It's pretty strong.
Yeah, you want to get a one-on-one reading, not think where they're going to send you some endless amount of different things about different. All right, we done? All right. So, the end of this story. Okay. So, as I said, he goes to this woman, he says exactly what I told him to say to her. He says, look, it's okay, I understand. You're frightened of sex, I understand, no problem. We'll just be friends and have a meal together once a week. This is what he tells me. She threw herself across the room, tore my clothes off, threw me on the floor and had her way with me. Surrogate seduction. Because, for an Aries, red flag at all. I'll show you I'm not afraid. How dare you spell that I'm afraid? I'm going to show you right now I'm not afraid, right? And so that was, but the thing about Aries, amongst other things, is that they tend to have a lot of arguments with Aries, because it's like how they show affection for you. When they stop arguing with you, it's like they've lost interest. And her challenge to him, her dare to him was to buy her this extremely expensive Louis Vuitton handbag, because her parents had cut her off because she was spending so much money on sports cars and stuff, right? And he wouldn't do it, and so she ended it and stuff, and so he probably dodged a bullet that way. I know probably a lot of you are skeptics and stuff, but I hope you were entertained by the talk, and I hope you come to as many talks next week. Really important talk on Visa Therapy Day next week with Darren McGarry from Thai Visa Company. So hope you enjoyed the talk.
Put your hands together for Ren Lexander. Thank you very much, Ren.